how to provide an experience, especially with all the technology that's out there, to sort of elevate that client experience. From the client's perspective, they want things to be relatively quick. They want clarity as to what to expect, and they want to be cared about. And I mean, just put yourself in their shoes. If you were to go hire an attorney, it's not just trying to give them a solution, but it's building a connection, because that might be the only time that you're directly communicating with this client before they get put in your, the flow of the rest of your procedures.
Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, Ruby Powers. Ruby L. Powers, a board-certified immigration attorney and founder of Powers Law Group PC, has over 17 years of expertise in law practice management and legal innovation. Author of Power Up Your Practice and host of the Power Up Your Practice podcast, she is also a professor and national and international speaker. She's a pioneer in remote law practice and an early adopter of AI-driven legal tools. Through all of these things, Ruby helps firms modernize and grow through her consulting company, Powers Strategy Group. She also serves as co-vice chair of ABA Tech Show and contributes regularly as a columnist for ABA Law Practice Magazine, Above the Law, and the Texas Bar Journal. The webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and we will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the presentation, time permitting. So if you have questions, please feel free to submit those today by clicking the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and sending them in there. Now, without further ado, here is Ruby to discuss the client-centric practice service that sets you apart.
Thank you so much, Nina. Well, everyone, it's great to be here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So, okay. Well, in this space, when we are in we are in the professional service industry, and very often we sort of forget that. We forget that the service component of it. And there's been a lot of talk more recently, I've noticed, in conferences and CLEs about the client-centered uh, focus, if you will. And there's been books about it, and there's more of also just how to provide an experience, especially with all the technology that's out there, to sort of elevate that client experience. In fact, I even went to a conference this year on a client experience summit, actually, and it's really helped open my eyes to other ways to improve. So let's take this journey through this experience, and I think we should just come in with open eyes and mind of, how can we improve? Uh, if you're like me, you've had your practice for a while. It's actually 17 years old this month. And, it's sometimes you can get stuck in your ways. You're like, well, that's how we do it. But it goes back to that whole Carol Dweck concept of the growth mindset. Are we going to have a growth mindset, or are we going to have a fixed mindset? And so maybe there's some way things we do because that's the way it made sense at the time. But now with new technology or different people in different seats, it doesn't make sense to do that anymore. So let's just come with an open mind to how maybe we can come up with a few ideas on how we can make some changes to how we run our practice. And then let's also, I'd say, have a little notepad or type up some notes of like what your takeaways, I'd say, what are your top 3 to 5 takeaways from this presentation that you want to either delegate someone to look into something, or you want to do some tests, run some numbers, and how you can improve your client journey. So, like Nina said, I do a lot of different things, but I'd say I'm really big in immigration. I'm the American Immigration Lawyers Association, Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma chapter secretary right now, and help organize about 1,900 attorneys in those 3 states for all the information that we're going through right now. But board certified, and my firm is 16 years old this month. And so basically that if you do the math, I started my practice 1 year out of being licensed. Then the other area is law practice management. Wrote 2 books about law practice management, have a podcast, and speak and present, and I'm a professor, adjunct professor on that topic. And then the third area is just a lot of advocacy too for the community on various topics related to those other 2 that I mentioned. But let's go ahead and dive right in. And I gave my links to my LinkedIn, the book, and the podcast in the chat. So maybe they can share that with you as we progress if you want to stay in touch. So, what are we going to cover? Client communication defines dissatisfaction, not just results. Um, I think sometimes we get used to thinking that we're getting bugged by the clients versus the fact that they're just searching for answers and want confirmation and answers. Sometimes they are a little excessive, but sometimes they just maybe there's because we don't have a better system in place to keep them informed. Understanding what the clients expect from your firm. I think a lot of that comes from assigning expectations from the very beginning, from how you present your firm in your marketing materials to how you answer the phone and how what happens in a consultation or in the screening process. It's important to map the client journey and figure out how you can improve the flow. And, I really talk a lot about legal tech. I forgot to mention, but she Nina mentioned that I am the ABA Tech Show co-vice chair. And I once ran my law firm from Dubai. And so ever since then, about 14 years ago, I've really been, even before that, I've been really focusing on how I can leverage technology to increase the client experience, but also my mobility of practice as well. Um, and so the client journey, I think, goes hand in hand with leveraging technology. And how can we make it easier to be hired? Of course, we're like, yeah, that we want to be easy to be hired. But really, what we're talking about is reducing the friction for your firm to be engaged and the agreement to assigned and to move on and the client attorney relationship, and the importance of the people and the systems in place and the tech that helps make it all work together. And then getting that feedback on a regular basis on how we can improve. And because I feel like, I don't know if I'm bringing a lot to what I think to the table, but I talk to lots of people. So I think it's similar, is that sometimes we're afraid to ask for feedback because what if they make a whole bunch of complaints? And then what if I don't know. Why are we afraid to ask for feedback? I think that would probably be good for us to know so we can improve. I think that goes back to that whole fixed and growth mindset paradigm. So why does any of this matter? Well, I mean, we are in the service industry. We are professional service industry. Sort of, we don't make widgets, in a factory or anything. And that's why it can be hard to compare when clients might be shopping around, how much you charge for this, how much you charge for that, because what we provide it's sort of hard to quantify. But um, there's Richard Susskind is a really great thought leader, author, speaker on legal tech. And he has a book called The Future, he has a lot of books actually, The Future of Professions. And he also talks a lot about like how, like, let's say people don't go to doctors because they want to go see a doctor. They want health. And they're either trying to have the a preventative or they have an acute issue at the time. And it's the same thing with us. They're not coming to us because they just specifically want to come talk to lawyers. Like they want to not have a problem. They either want to prevent a big problem, like having a will and a trust in place so that they don't create a bigger problem, or they, like in my case, the client's detained and they're trying to get them out, and it's an acute issue that needs immediate attention. And so they come to us because that's how the system has been built up. But we're also in a place where a lot more technology, ChatGPT, for example, there's even a article in The Economist right now about how people are using it so much more for so many different things, and it's keeping them from communicating with professionals that they normally would. But the point of what I'm getting at is that they they want they need the help. How are they going to get the help, whether it's from a lawyer or not? they want that they need that service. And we are there to help them through their problem and through their issue. And the more that we can compete in this changing world and facilitate the solution, then they're going to continue to come to us. But we have to adapt and see where the competition is around and what in other industries, how they are communicating with our clients and how people the what's it called, the just sort of the engagement of the client out in the other spaces. And we'll get to that soon. So communication is super important. We know that, but sometimes we think we're communicating enough, but maybe we aren't. And so having that feedback is valuable, or maybe the message is not coming across correctly. And the consistency creates that loyalty, just like favorite brands. Why do you go to those the you know the in the certain restaurant that you know you're going to get the same thing no matter where you go, the franchise brands, or if you buy something from somewhere because you know what you're going to get, and generally in theory. And in many cases with firms, they're more of a smaller size, so they don't have that the location and the sort of like that expanse. But having had my practice for 17 years, for example, or 16 years, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. Um, People come back, and it's because they know what they had and they expect that same consistency. And so the longer your practice has been around, or the more you have that reach, you're able to demonstrate that, and you can benefit from that. They want the reliability, predictability. I mean, how sometimes people go to the same place for vacation. Have you ever done that? It's because they're like, I want to relax. I want to have a good time. I know I had a good time at this place. I'm going to go back again. It's sort of the same thing. And so that consistency is what maximizes that client experience. So we need to raise the bar on this. So often I think when you do some research on this, it's like lawyers sort of had a monopoly on being the experts. This is sort of what I got from the Future of Professions book for Richard Susskind I was mentioning. And so we were passing down this knowledge from one to lawyers to lawyers, but now there's accessibility of information all over the place. There's people can watch TikToks and YouTubes and ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever. They can go anywhere. They're like now, and they're finding answers now. Is it true? Is it the right answer? But but anyway, there is a disruption in this information space. So what's another theme to this whole conversation is a really good idea I thought from Jordan Furlong, and he says that in this AI space that we're in, this new revolution, I guess, if you will, of how we're going to be in a post AI world in the legal space, is that we're going to be there to advocate, advise, and accompany our clients. And and so I think what we're seeing is that firms who are ahead on that Rogers innovation curve are going to be the innovators and the early adopters at the beginning of the curve. They're going to be leveraging technology to increase the client experience and to take away the administrative and just sort of like the dull parts of being in a practice. And they're going to increase the speed, they're going to increase efficiency and accuracy, and they're going to provide options for more options for the client. And so this is what's going to help set you apart from other firms if you can lean into that. The best practices you had before, but add in improved use of technology and that consistency coupled with getting feedback. But we really do need to raise the bar in our practice in general. So, part of it all is to have a system to make it work. You have, and I sort of look at like a computer program. I have about 20 or so team members right now, and the way we're able to work, I don't have to talk to everybody every day because everyone knows what they're supposed to do. And when something goes awry, we just figure out, was this a glitch or did someone just not do the thing they were supposed to do? We need more training, or was it an accident? Is the glitch as in there's something we didn't plan for in our system? But the more the standard operating procedures are written out for every function, the more the team is trained, the more you have the right people in the right seats, then this is going to be almost seamless that you'll have this amazing client-based service in your law firm. So you need to document those standard operating procedures. You need to train your team regularly, and you also need to recognize when they're doing great. I think sometimes we bring if you don't have a culture of rewarding them when they're excelling, you need to do that. I'll just do a side note. If you're not used to, a lot of us as leaders, we bring some of our baggage to the management, whether we weren't used to being recognized or maybe we avoided confrontation or whatever. So a lot of the things that might have been a way that made you who you are, you need to have that evaluation to see how you can improve and know yourself as a leader, as well as when you're building up your leadership team so that they can help you build this excellent I guess machine of a law firm, that the system that's going to work. And so when you recognize that the reward, that excellent, that behavior that you want that's tied to your core values, like we're going the extra mile, providing extra customer service, um, solving a problem before we realize it was a problem, then you're going to be able to reinforce the behavior and the culture that you want. And so that culture plus consistency will create the loyalty, and it will allow you to have a better system that'll continue to work. So I think I've mentioned this, so maybe you've heard me say this once before, I don't know, but I used to think culture was just cake and tacos. And as long as I had cake for their birthday, and if I had tacos on Tuesdays occasionally, then hey, I'm winning. But then I realized it's so much more to that. It's recognizing the small wins and the big wins. It's letting people live their working with your team members to work with them and their needs with their schedule, or with their childcare caregiving. It's leaning into when you see those core values being displayed and rewarding them for that. What I learned a lot in the beginning of my practice was that I wasn't keeping tabs on my culture, and so therefore it was creating sort of a vacuum in which whoever else was paying attention to it was creating the culture. And then it got toxic and it got messy. And I pretty much had to almost start again from ground zero with some new team members. So it was definitely a lot of work. So I will say, well, we pause here for a second. If you have all your standard operating procedures written now and you're like, yay, I'm winning, I've got that, but you think you might have some of the wrong people in the wrong seats, or you're not encouraging them to continue to grow, then this is, if you're not keeping tabs on your culture that aligns with your core values, then this is where you could have a lot of problems. I think there's that expression where culture can eat strategy for breakfast. This invisible force that if you don't keep tabs on it, is can completely corrupt and take over. And so I'd say maybe do a status check. Do you have a good culture? Is there room for improvement? And I will say that it's hard if you have a staff of maybe more than 5 or 6 to be in charge of it yourself if you're also the owner, because you're so focused on a lot of other functions. And so I would say as soon as you can have someone else on your team help you. And maybe there's a lot of people who are at a large firm, and maybe there's even a whole job just dedicated to this. We've seen it at firms and companies. Then they can lean into this. But this is everything from recognizing anniversaries with the firm to birthdays to other big wins. And like we even did like the Dundee Awards, but like in a happy way, I guess, on core values. And we gave out awards for that, like The Office, for example. You can really have a lot of fun. I have a friend who divides his team up into the 4 houses of Harry Potter, and they compete against each other, and they work together on like as a team on their key performance indicator goals. I mean, you really can have a lot of fun with this, and I think it also comes from the top in terms of you communicating the value of customer service. So if like you're saying, oh man, our clients they complain too much, or they blah 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 blah, then what are you saying to the rest of your team? Like, it's okay to complain about them. And yeah, okay, every once in a while, maybe there's a little vent session, but the point of it is like, we're, the clients are coming to us when they're very vulnerable and they need our help. And we don't have a job without clients. So, so even when people are like, I'm self-employed, I don't have a boss. No, you sort of do, because all your clients are your boss. And you have to keep that in check. So I'm very impressed by people who are in the customer service industry. I love listening to them talk. I love learning the way they do things. I learned a lot of this through trial and error, like I think a lot of other attorneys did. I once was a waitress like one summer in high school, and sure taught me a lot. I feel like we all should do that at some point when we're kids, or appropriate ages, right, for that. But because you can see the direct correlation between how you do with your tips. And I think that really actually, even though that was when I was in high school, it really helped me later on when I was having my own practice. And hospitality, oh my goodness, they're so trained on this. Is there in healthcare, I think to a certain extent as well, when they talk about the bedside manner, retail as well. There's this book called Persuasion, The Power of Influence, or some variation like that. So it's a really good book. And there's so many really good tactics that I hadn't even thought about in terms of sales, but also it's about communication psychology. And I think that we can learn a lot in law from other industries. As I don't know about you, but when I go out and about, I call it like in the wild, out of my law firm. I when I'm on vacation or interacting with other industries, I love to learn how things are done and see how I can incorporate that, if that's a best practice, into my practice as well. So we need to treat the clients as valued partners and not just numbers, and to definitely be invested in them, but shifting our mindset to have that connection as well. I don't know about you, but like I feel like some of my first time clients in the first several years I have like a closer connection to, because and they're still coming back for more services or referring, and family and friends. But because I would directly worked with them closer than the ones like after the last, after that first 5 years or so. But I try to lean into that feeling for all clients as much as I can. So from the client's perspective, they want things to be relatively quick. They want clarity as to what to expect, and they want to be cared about. And I mean, just put yourself in their shoes. If you were to go hire an attorney for a service that, a lot of times people don't want to talk to attorneys. That's why there's all those like lawyer jokes, and they don't know attorneys and hang out with them. But if you're an attorney, usually you know a whole bunch of attorneys and you hang out with almost only attorneys. But anyway, we need to do a better job in building that better rapport. But we are one of those trusted contacts, and we need to make sure that we keep that relationship going and that seamless communication. So there's a lot of different ways to do that, from having automated systems, and I'm going to go into that really soon, about how do you communicate updates, whether it's from a client portal, an app, or an email and automation. But really, if they're asking a ton of questions, it's either because something wasn't clear um, in the first place, or it's very likely that it's probably the firm's fault in trying to figure out how they can better communicate. There probably is a percentage of the people who are just very anxious and run a lot of questions through their head. But if you are doing these case types over and over again, then you should be able to have these templates and these answers, and anticipate what their questions are before they even ask them. And the team culture, we need to feel responsive, even when the cases might have a long time for processing. I have some cases that take a few years to get a decision. But what the client wants to know is that we're still monitoring the case, and that still care about them. We still know about them. And so even if there's like the update can be helpful to let them know that you're still thinking about them and you're still monitoring their case. So think about it. Clients are interacting with the likes of Uber and Amazon and so many different industries where they can, with an app, don't have to talk to a human, and they know where their package is or when the car's coming, what the car looks like, what the license plate is. So how can you take some of the lessons from and even the pizza tracker, right, with Domino's. Susie took the order, somebody doing quality control. It's in the oven. You almost feel like you're right there staring at the oven with the pizza in there, right, at the same time. And then, like Joe is out there driving the pizza to your house. And I don't know about you, but like I saw it on my app, like it's like the little car icon coming to my house. So, did I talk to a human at all? No, I didn't. But did I know exactly what was happening? Yes, I did. So, what can we do with some of these these experiences that they're getting to bring that to our law firm? And there are some systems coming about, the company called Hona and Case Status. They're focused on the client experience. Those are the only two that I've heard of. But there's also, I think, your case management software are trying to create more of these type of opportunities to create more these updates and more seamlessness in the client experience. So those happy clients are going to give you more referrals, that retention, the positive reviews, and then it's less expensive to go acquire new clients. Like, honestly, a majority of my clients are from referrals. I remember when I started my firm, I was so jealous of people who had a firm like older than me, which was like everybody, because they could live off of or they could have a lot of referrals. But now that I've had it for so long, now I'm seeing that. And so as long as I keep the existing clients happy and I get people engaged and informed about all the changes, like a substantial amount of my client base is from referrals. And so that is wonderful for me, for my practice. And I think other firms that have that too. So, in a statistic, I found only 9% of firms offer a client service, self-service tool like a mobile app, even though they boost satisfaction efficiency. I know there's so many apps out there, but this is an important aspect. And it's a lot easier now to create some of these programs than there were before, but this could be a way to communicate with your client. So let's think about some options to help make that client-centered operations, the intake and consultation steps. How easy is it to be onboarded, get the information you need to be scheduled, to know what to expect? Being the fees and the next steps from a consultation, everything from the payment plan, if there is a payment plan, or payment options for acquiring the funds, and keeping the process as simple and client friendly as possible. How easy is it to be your client? Have you done an audit to see what that looks like? And maybe I find what sometimes you get so disconnected because you're maybe moving up the hierarchy that you don't really know there might be a kink in the system and that there's really something that's a little bit silly and that's causing backlogs and delays, or that people are having to fill out a form 2 times, or the information is not getting passed on to the appropriate party. So these are some ways to help reduce that frequent that uh, to reduce the friction. So having multiple ways to have a consultation, probably I think that's sort of like very common now. For us, it's like phone, Zoom, and in person. Some people are just remote. What to expect, what to get the most out of it. Like, so we have a lot of complex cases, and so those first impressions are very important, and making sure that you are monitoring this closely uh, for your sales funnel. So what do I mean by that? That means where do the clients come from? Is there a chat bot on the social media or on the website? Is there a contact form? The other thing to consider, who answers the phone? How are they trained? How easy is it to get a hold of somebody? Are you using a reception AI bot for answering? And have you given them the appropriate um, training for that? Are you sort of like new to that space? So do you have answers, call answered after hours and on the weekends? I think that's becoming such a standard now to have that, uh, so that because most people do not want to leave a voicemail. If you leave a voicemail, do you expect anything to come from it? I think it sort of depends on your generation, but I think I'm curious what people think about that, honestly. But I think a lot of people would just be like, I just talked to, it was a black hole. They don't know if anyone's ever going to respond back to them. So do you have a website? Do you have a way to contact you multiple ways? Is it easy to, do you have someone answering 24/7, or at least there's a backup? These are the types of things that those first impressions are really critical. So then, and unless I think in the PI space, it's a little bit different with how the consultations are, but for the majority of the other area types, there's a consultation. And in this space, this is where the we've had an intake sheet that the clients provided some basic information. We've already learned a little bit about maybe some documents that they presented to us. And then we we look to see, in a consultation, there's a lot to cover. You're building rapport, you are trying to establish the situation, you're trying to give them a solution and a timeline and potentially legal fees. Now, I've heard of some firms separating out the solution or like the fees and the timeline, and they maybe have someone else walk them through that. But for the most part, a lot of this is what needs to get covered. It's listening, diagnosing the issue, giving a solution, and what does that solution look like for next steps. So but there's a lot of room for improvement here. For example, if you're in person or maybe you're just virtual, do you type up the notes or do you use some type of secure AI tool to dictate for you? There's a company called Quirius that's specifically for lawyers and consultations. It does that, but it also has a way to help prompt questions and information, and listening in as sort of a assist in a way. There's also a company called Relaw that does something similar with having all the recordings in one place that you can keep with the file. But otherwise, maybe you're using like AI companion potentially to give you a quick summary of what was discussed. After I started using a tool similar to what I'm saying, this has really revolutionized my client experience for myself, at least, because now I'm more focused on talking and listening, more like listening, honestly, and my instinct of asking questions, versus me having to worried about getting all these things written up. And then because I then have that, I'm able to send a post consultation follow up that's tailored to their case that talks about what we talked about and what the next steps are. Honestly, I probably started doing this about a month or so ago, and it's been a huge game changer. Just like when I started doing intakes, like probably 12 or 14 years ago, and that was a huge game changer, filling out a questionnaire and intake before the consultation. It cut my time in half. So if you're not doing those, I would definitely suggest that. And if you're experimenting with other ways to take notes, I would highly suggest that. But I've talked to other attorneys about this. Once they started using these tools to help take notes, then they were able to really engage with the client. They were able to build a relationship. And going back to what I had said before that Jordan Furlong mentioned, the advocate, advise, and accompany. That is a beautiful example of how we're leveraging the technology to build a better connection, because that's really what we're doing. It's not just trying to give them a solution, but it's building a connection, because that might be the only time that you're directly communicating with this client before they get put in your, the flow of the rest of your procedures. It sometimes happens with my firm, actually. I wanted to mention this. So building that rapport early helps strengthen that relationship and that loyalty. There was this really good book called Super Communicators that I was recommended by, and it's by Charles, I think, Duhigg. And there's a lot of good content in that book, but a couple of things were understand the type of conversation you're having, I feel like we're having a combination of maybe emotional and practical when the consultation, depending on how emotional it is. And you also want to mirror the tone and emotion, building the rapport. There's also this book called Cues, Cues by Vanessa Van Edwards. And she was a keynote at a conference I went to recently. She talked a lot about everything from like when you're tilting your head to can show concern to like fronting when the individual comes in the room and like acknowledging them. But there's so much to this. I feel like as a rainmaker with the empathy, I've sort of excelled in these types of things, but I didn't really understand what I was doing. And so when I read her book and I also read The Super Communicators, it started making more sense, like sort of the science behind it. So if you're not really good at that in general, or if you need to help train the rest of your team, I would suggest taking a look at these books and see what you can do. The other thing from her book was she talked about the being charismatic and to be charismatic, which helps with rainmaking and connection, is you have to be high on your competence and your empathy. And so that's what helps you be more charismatic. And so if you have those, then you're more likely to make a lasting impression on an individual. So, just in general, you're going to be asking, reflecting back, when people say, if I understand you correctly, that type of thing. And then that they feel heard. And this also allows you, when you're building that rapport, to find out, sort of like peeling the pieces of the onion to build a better, to figure out what's really going on and if there's more to it. I don't know about you, but I sort of feel like a detective when I'm in a consultation because I'm having to figure out what they're eligible for, and there might be something that that I have to dig a little bit deeper. And so the point about this book was also that it's a skill you can develop with intention, and I think that is important to note for your team members. It might be a good book, those two that I mentioned, to have some of your leadership or some of your team look at, or to take a look at the key points and see how you can better leverage those lessons in your communication as for your clients. So it's important to have those clear agreements in your consultation, your attorney-client agreement, being able to, depending on the ethics of the state that you're licensed in or that you're practicing in, but for the most part, we put what the scope of representation, the fees, the payment plan, and a lot of other important terms. There are some firms I think that don't have these agreements, but this is really critical. It's not that hard now with all these e-signature tools out there. And on top of that, we also put it in the language of the client as well, so that they understand and as an immigration law firm, we have a lot of multilingual clients. That transparency in the payment process is essential. Not only do we have it in our client agreement, we also have a handout that we send them in the consultation, whether it's in person or virtually. And in that, it talks about what our fees are, what the processing times are, and what's included and what's not included. I think when you think about adult learning, you have to think about how um, what what is sort of the process, how do people learn? And in our case, my clients, we're dealing with different languages, cultures. We're also dealing with individuals who've been traumatized. And so I've just come to realization that I like to have things in multiple ways. A handout so they can see. I explain it. I also don't pressure them to sign right away. It's good for 2 weeks. That way there's some time, but there's a deadline, but there's still a little time to breathe so that it doesn't feel like a rushed decision. And then once they decide to sign and pay, then they become a client, and it reduces that friction process. But the importance of that contract is to clarify the scope. And I think you need to train your team to be cognizant of what's listed on the contract. Like there's my legal assistants are supposed to read the contract first, what exactly is listed, because there could be some variation, but if you don't do what's listed, or maybe you start doing the things that are not listed, as in outside the scope without being paid for, and that can be a problem as well. So set those expectations early and provide regular updates, even when there's no news. So if you can set up a system either with like Hona case status or your case management software that gives them an automated update of like, nope, we're still waiting on the government. It should take another, I don't know, 6 more months, or we're waiting on you, or whatever, wherever it is in the process, so that they understand and you have clear communication about that. And if you come to find out that things are going to be taking longer, letting them know. The sooner you can pass on that, that what might otherwise be considered as bad news, the better, because then it's sort of like ripping off the Band-Aid. You get it told, and you move on. And that clarity can build that long-term trust, and so that they're more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt and recommend other people to you. And one of the things that we do is we have a newsletter that goes out in English and Spanish every other week. And I don't know when we started it, but I'm so glad I started. I think this really helps captivate or activate. So I think the word I'm trying to say about my prospective clients, my existing clients, my former clients, and it lets them know what's going on. We do a little bit of happy news and something cute, like today, November 7th, is Love Your Lawyer Day. Did you know that? So you can give yourself a hug, I guess. So, but anyway, so we put that in the newsletter, and then we might do something like our Fall Fest. We had a pumpkin design contest. But anyway, the point is we've got updates going on in our TikTok or YouTube. We have webinars, we have the newsletter, and if you can give your client a regular update about their particular case, then they will be more at peace. I think what we did beforehand was we told them, okay, it's been filed, so it could take a long time. So we'll just let you know when something comes up. But for some people, that they forget that, or they're too anxious about that, or they assume that you didn't care about them or something. And so by I would do it as an experiment if you're not already doing it already, by giving them a regular update that just says that, yep, we're still waiting, or this is what we're doing, or this is what's happening. I'm curious, you probably will avoid them following up with you if you're proactive with that, and to preventing their anxiety with that clear information, and keeping them up to date. So there's a lot of new tools out there that there weren't before. Client portals, not all client portals are created equal. Can you upload, download documents, e-signatures, text updates? I feel like I can text my clients 5 million different ways, but it's about where's the most convenient that can save the information being transferred. Easy scheduling for consultations, but also follow-ups with your existing clients as necessary, and secure file sharing through secure manners, using ideally the client portal if possible. You can also record videos on like, for example, you can onboarding video that you have, and you can post it on your YouTube page, for example. And it could be like, this is the welcome to Powers Law Group. We're so grateful that you hired us. This is how we communicate with you. You'll receive a questionnaire, and once we have that information provided, we will follow up with a list of any remaining questions. Sort of like an onboarding, almost like the video you watch when you're on a plane of like what to expect, that type of thing. And if I don't know if that's a good analogy, but anyway, you can have videos for lots of different steps along the way, so that you can send that to them. Because back to how do people learn? People don't always read things. They might be better visually or with a video, and also put subtitles, I would say. So this is the type of thing you can do. We have Zoom, we have Loom, we have so many things. You could put it on your YouTube. You can put private links to somewhere else. You can put an automation. You can use this tech to tailor it to the client's comfort level. So those are some fun things to think about. When you need to make sure that you have the right teams members and the right seats, and that you're working with them to, you've clarified the roles, you have the right people in the right seats, you've simplified systems, you're leveraging technology. When I find out my team did something like the old way but didn't use an AI tool, I get really annoyed because I'm like, no, no, no. And I guess it's really my fault for not making sure that it's clear, but like, don't do it the old school way. Like, there's so many more efficient ways to do things now. And ultimately, if we can be more efficient, then we can either be more profitable or we can pass on that savings to our clients as well, depending on if you're hourly or flat fee, etc. But anyway, we want to have that consistency in the service, regardless of who's the assistant or the team member working with them, because that creates that consistency and trust. And I do find that having regular team meetings and trainings about the different tools really help in that accountability, but on the consistency of the client experience as well, so that everyone knows what they're supposed to do. And so we have what we call PLG, Powers Law Group University, and we have trainings on different topics. We have regular team meetings, and we also talk about our tech as well and how we can better leverage it. So the client, your team is really important in the whole client experience because they're the ones helping provide that client experience. The tech is a component, but it's really your team that is really essential, and that um, it's also, I mean, think about the client experience. It's important to have boundaries. You're going to be tested. Like, people want things really quickly. Can you pull that off or not? Or they want to have a payment plan that's very generous to them, and you've learned the hard way that it's very unlikely they're going to pay on time. Or also maybe people are taking clients or someone related to a client is taking out there's issue out on your receptionist by being really rude. So these are the things you need to train your staff of what's acceptable and not acceptable, and to escalate how to problem solve. If we find out a client is being unreasonable, rude, we will have a talk with them, but we'll be very likely willing to just to let them go. We have to see what the situation is and what our ethical obligations were, but we don't want to condone that behavior. We want to be able to empower our staff to when what the escalation protocols are and how to troubleshoot. I don't want to hear that my team like silently suffered and like put up with it. I want them to feel like they can communicate and to a supervisor and let us know what's happening, and so we can address it head on. Because if you don't address it head on, then the client or whoever is gonna continue to do that, and it's gonna become a part of the culture that that's acceptable. So this is not the fun topic to talk about, but this is a critical part. Everything from prospective clients calling or consultations and how people are treated to how existing clients communicate and interact with. And it's also like if your staff is doing a lot of work and they're waiting, waiting, waiting for the client to get something, you might just have to, just give them a deadline. You have to give them a deadline, and because that's another thing from the influence psychology book I mentioned, that people need deadlines, to be able to, actually, Parkinson's law. Actually, that's what's from. But it's also in that book about how you need to be able to people interact. If you have a deadline, you have a not don't have a deadline. Which thing are you going to do first? The thing with the deadline. And so that's a critical. I was at a conference and one of my friends was talking about how she has these smackdown letters, a smackdown SDLs, smackdown letters. I was like, that is hilarious. And she sends those out when the clients are not doing what they're supposed to do and they take too long. I was like, we should do that too. We should have the smackdown letter. Like, it's we don't call them that, but we do have the inactivity letter, but it doesn't sound as cool. But anyway, that's another way to make sure that you don't let them take advantage of you. And you have, because you're wanting to get the most, they want to get the most out of the relationship, and likewise for you. So if there's a mistake, own it and address it as soon as possible, communicate that. I think about, well, if this were to go to to be reviewed by someone else, what was my timeline? How quickly after I found out about a mistake did I try to address it? Did I move forward? These are the types of things, like what was the play by play? Handle the client caused problems professionally. Um, the sooner you address things, the sooner when you're informed in addressing it, the better, as opposed to sort of like sweeping it under the rug and hoping that nobody makes a big deal about it. That's usually when there's more problems along those lines. And usually there could be like certain things that you happen occasionally, hopefully not that much. Like for example, a bad review. What's your protocol for that? If that happens every once in a while, you probably have a protocol. It's like communicate with the individual who wrote the review, see how you can remedy it, try to respond to it, and try to get some other good reviews that are more recent as well. So we pretty much have a policy for that. And this we give all our opportunities to learn from them. We're growing. So all of us are growing if we choose to grow. The more we can ask for feedback from our clients, then we can really get insights. As opposed to just asking at the very end. There's the net promoter score. You could ask them, how likely are you to recommend the firm? You could ask them after a consult. You could ask them soon after you got started along the way with the case. You could ask them at the end of the case. Many firms do not ask their clients about their client experience. Actually, only about 7%, according to a case status report, ask their clients for the net promoter score, which means that they're not getting that. Most firms are not getting that feedback on a regular basis. So the more you do ask, then the more you can find ways to improve. And the fact that you're asking, I think, speaks volumes as well that you're actually even doing that. So it's building that loyalty and trust. So this client experience gap perception versus reality, this is from this case status report, came out this year. Most firms, we all think we're delivering this excellent service, but newsflash, clients often disagree. 72% of attorneys describe their firms as caring, but only 40% of clients are using that same term. So there's a disconnect here, or a gap. And just 21% of clients say their legal team asked for feedback or cared about their experience. Wow, 21%. I Yeah, I could sort of see that. I think this wasn't really built into the way we were taught how to practice law, and so we're trying to change that narrative right now. So from satisfied clients can become loyal promoters, and promoters, it really just means like referring your firm. So building that emotional connection will drive that advocacy, like, hey, you should call that firm. You should call this. I really like them. They did a good job. And so then they're gonna feel, if they feel trusted and relieved and informed, then they're gonna be your your champion. And that leads to higher reviews. And they love it when that communication's proactive, as opposed to reactive. So you're giving them information before they find out, and they're able to you're anticipating their needs in advance. There is this gap, a lot of firms are not measuring the net promoter score, for example. And but then there's some that very few are. And when they are, it's increasing their client engagement and their reviews and their process. So at the very end of your relationship with the client, providing a case closing letter, um, well, we're done. Thanks for hiring us. This concludes this client attorney relationship. Or we're letting you know providing you your files. Or we've already provided your files, and we have concluded the scope of our agreement. Whether you're going to hold on to some of your digital files or not, or paper files, whatever the rules are, whatever your policy is. But we like to clarify that we're giving them their copies of their files, their physical, if we had any, and that we're done. And we have a whole procedure for that. And then if we don't have physical files except for our court ones, but we also make sure that they have access to their own documents. And I think this helps create sort of like a separation of when the scope ends. And then also gives them instructions on what to do next if there is something like, for some of our green card clients, maybe in 3 to 5 years, they're eligible for naturalization, for example. And that will tickler to reach out to them, but they also can reach out to us when closer to that time. We also encourage reviews and referrals and set up those reminders, like I mentioned. So There's a lot to be said about this client journey, and we are professional service providers. I think we weren't always taught the best way to provide that service, and so that's why there's books and programs like this to help give us a reminder and give us some fresh food for thought on how we can best give that client experience. But also, there's a lot new tools out there, so maybe something you considered doing before the tech wasn't there, but now it probably is. So what I would suggest is to identify at least one client service area that you can improve right now. Like right now, we're working on our intake to hire from the initial call or contact to the consult space, and we're cleaning that up to try to improve the client experience. And then implement a feedback system. Maybe you just ask a few clients and then you build up your ways of asking for more. Maybe use like your existing newsletter system to email and put a survey on there, or you put an automation to ask for feedback. This is what's going to help you grow and improve, and it's also going to signal to your client, your prospective client, and your staff that you're open for that room for improvement. Train your team on communication best practices. I mentioned a couple of great books, from the Super Communicator to the Influence, the Power of Persuasion, to the Cues, about communication. And then make sure that you're aligning that tech to support your client experience to make it easier to have streamline that entire client experience from the beginning to the end. And if we can shift one part of the process from transactional to relational starting this week, like how can you improve that relationship? One of the other things we like to do is to also send like holiday cards, or, at times we had cookies we gave out when people had the consultation and we gave them something they didn't expect. You can read a lot about those customer service books about how to provide that amazing service. And if you can start implementing those, that can help your practice as well. I have an AI toolkit. You can, if you want to download it here, there's also aspects of the client experience as well. But I think if you're streamline your procedures, like I mentioned, then you can help incrementally improve your client experience. I also have a school community on Power Up Your Practice, and you can always reach out to me to follow up and continue the conversation of a book called Power Up Your Practice. It's available on Amazon. I know we're at the almost at the top of the hour, so if we have any questions, feel free to let me know. And I just wanted to say, feel free to reach out to me in some capacity and stay connected. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rudy. It looks like we have one question in the queue and might be a couple more. As a reminder, you can send those in by clicking the Q&A button. We're almost to the top of the hour, so we'll just take a few. This first question is, what are some common communication breakdowns that can cause client dissatisfaction, even when case outcomes may be favorable?
Mm, um, oh, yeah. That's a really good one. Let's see. I I think what happens is you have to have consistency. So, like, if what's said in the consultation is different than what is they're getting from the legal assistant or the whoever they work with afterwards, like if the consultation says the attorney says we're gonna get this filed in less than 2 weeks, but the legal assistant's like has no clue about that, is not in a rush whatsoever, whatever. That's one example. That inconsistency in the communication between the like sort of like the sales, I guess you could say, in the consultation and the actual the legal provided. That's one really big one. And I think that goes back to just sort of that franchise mentality of having the consistency along the whole way. And that goes through training and having standard operating procedures. But I probably, if I had a minute, I could think about some more places where problems happen.
Thank you for that insight, Ruby. Our next question, we'll just take two more, is
Okay.
how can firms measure and improve their communication speed without
Mm.
sacrificing accuracy?
Well, I think that brings up a really good point where, and I think I forgot to mention is that we say, oh, we're going to respond in 24 hours or I don't know, 48 hours, but who's actually measuring that? And the actual amount of time that we're really responding. So I think it would be improving communication speed would be start calculating first if you're not already doing that, and then see like what your prohibits you from responding quicker. But I also think if we're more proactive with the no update updates or getting them the answer before they ask, we might not be inundated with complex follow-up questions. And so I think it's sort of like the chicken and egg. Like if we could give it to them sooner, then maybe we won't get as much that could slow us down in trying to answer that. But also there's a lot of new tools out there. Like if multiple people are working on a case, they're like can use an AI tool within your case management to feel like what's going on with this case really easily, as opposed to having to have somebody who's not as familiar read up on everything. So that can be sort of, I think, solved in lots of different ways, but a fun question.
Thank you, Ruby. And then the last question we have time for today is how can mapping the client journey from intake to closure reveal some friction points? Are there things that you look for after you've kind of closed a case for regarding that?
Well, this is a really great question. I feel like I didn't plant that at all, but that's a great one. But basically, I once hired a consultant a long, long time ago, and we basically made a little sticky note for everything that happened along the way. And then when you sort of like have swim lines and you see these bottlenecks, like this person has to do this and then do that, and like what if that person's not there and who's the backup? And so that's the reason why it's beneficial, is because then you can see like is something redundant? Was something put there in place because the tech wasn't there at the time, but now it is? It makes you look back and question why you even do anything that you're doing, and is there a more efficient way to do it in the first place? So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ruby, for answering those questions. If we weren't able to get to your questions today, Ruby's contact information was in the slides, so you can utilize that. We want to thank you all so much for joining us for another Justia webinar. Your participation is always really appreciated. I do want to remind you all, as I did at the top of our presentation, of the services available to you through our website platform, Justia Elevate. It's our innovative, feature-packed website solution designed for law firms. You'll get access to tools like the Justia AI Writer to help you write content, our AI-powered Justia Chat to help you boost leads, and FAQs for AI, which can help you show up in those coveted AI results. So if you'd like to learn more about the pricing for your firm's needs, you can go to elevate.justia.com/price. That was the first link that was sent in the chat today as well, if that's helpful for you. Thank you all so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.